May I proceed? Your Honor, as Ms. De Andrade told you in her opening statement, ingredients matter. As the prosecution assembles the dish that is their case, they've tried to convince you that the key ingredient is Haley Fromholz. But every piece of evidence they've attempted to pair with my client can just as easily be paired with Alden Mitchell. Your Honor, a bowl of pasta is still a bowl of pasta, even if you substitute the penne for the spaghetti. In the prosecution's case, we can directly substitute Alden Mitchell for Haley Fromholz. And as such, they are missing the required ingredient of proof beyond reasonable doubt. As opposing counsel stated, Calcrum 224 mandates that in the presence of two or more reasonable alternative conclusions, one pointing towards my client's guilt and another towards her innocence, Your Honor, as the trier of fact, must accept the conclusion that favors innocence. You've heard the testimony tonight. You've heard opposing counsel's opposing argument. And as we examine the prosecution's dish, we can clearly see the easily substitutable ingredients, those reasonable alternatives that render it inedible. Let's go through the steps of the prosecution's recipe. They told you Chef Sears was killed by a Recipe for Success contestant who had a dream of being a cafe or restaurant owner, who disliked Morgan Sears, who knew about Heartstopper mushrooms, who went foraging for said mushrooms, who was alone in a location where there were Heartstopper mushrooms, and who had the opportunity to place a Heartstopper mushroom in my client's title. Your Honor, Alden Mitchell was on Recipe for Success. Alden Mitchell, too, had a lifelong dream of owning a restaurant. Alden Mitchell could identify a Heartstopper mushroom. Alden Mitchell said she hated Morgan Sears with a passion. Alden Mitchell went foraging. Alden Mitchell was alone on Upper Pete's Path, where we know there were Heartstopper mushrooms, and Alden Mitchell had the opportunity to plant a poisonous mushroom in my client's ingredients when Ms. Fromholz left her station. The station right next to Alden Mitchell. Now, let's look at the spaghetti the state has thrown against the wall to try and single out my client. The prosecution painted Morgan Sears as a volatile bullet. But Your Honor, we all know that the only place we can count on finding reality in reality television is in the name. Chef Sears was a performance, a role played on camera. The prosecution's own witness, Amari Rodriguez, told you it was all great television. And Chef Sears never been the first. Jean Kronstadt testified that in the real world, Morgan Sears and my client didn't have a bad relationship at all. The only actual bad relationship in our case stems from a negative Morgan Sears review, which Alden Mitchell was still shaking with anger about 4 years later. The prosecution stipulated that there were no Heartstopper mushrooms in my client's ingredients. They assert that she somehow obtained one from her cup, right under the nose of the eyes and ears of production. But Amari Rodriguez confirmed that leaving one station was unprecedented, and Ms. Fromholz only went after she received permission. So how could she have relied on having that opportunity? As for the spores on my client's sleeve, we heard Dr. Dunn's expert opinion that their source cannot be determined. It cannot be proven that there were even Heartstopper mushrooms along my client's path. That I-forged statement that opposing counsel relies on was never brought in for its truth. We don't know whether there were also Heartstopper spores on Alden Mitchell's book, but we do have direct evidence that there was a Heartstopper mushroom in her hand. Alden Mitchell told you so herself. She is the only person in our case whom we know handled Heartstopper mushrooms on April 9th. The same Alden Mitchell whose story that Ms. Fromholz begged, bullied, and manipulated her into going foraging was not at all the version of events you heard from neutral third party Dakota Morrison. Your Honor, Alden Mitchell had two obstacles in the way of $250,000 and her lifelong dream. One chef who was catnapping on the couch, and another who was brimming with excitement for the semifinals round, who told Ms. Mitchell her ideas were pedestrian and that she should turn to foraging. Alden Mitchell told you on cross that my client's suggestions inspired him. And it's a reasonable conclusion that they did just that. inspired Alden Mitchell to turn to forged ingredients and eliminate her toughest competition. Take advantage of Miss Fromhole's station being left unattended when Miss Fromhole's and the eyes and ears of production were in another room to plant a piece of poisonous mushroom in my client's ingredients, hoping that a judge, any judge, would get sick and Miss Fromhole's would take the blame. And if it was the judge that Alden Mitchell hated with a passion, all the better.
30 seconds.
Your Honor, you don't have to find that Alden Mitchell intended for Chef Sears to die. But it's a reasonable conclusion that Alden Mitchell, whom we already know is not fully honest about the surrounding events, had motive, means, and opportunity to plant that mushroom. And in the face of that crucial ingredient, that reasonable alternative, the defense respectfully requests a verdict of not guilty.